All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Winnetka Village Council study session for March 14th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Ask everybody to mute your cell phones and other electronic devices. And I would like to welcome all of the members of the Plan Commission this evening for our co-opt meeting. And I'll ask Rob to do a roll call of attendance for Village Council.
Thank you. Trustee Apatow?
Here.
Trustee Kripe?
Here.
Trustee Handler?
Here.
Trustee Swerk?
Here.
Trustee Dearborn? President Rentz.
Here. All right, and I'll now ask David Schoen to do a roll call for attendance for the Plan Commission.
Member Case,
Here.
Member Danley,
Here.
Member Foley,
Here.
Member Kunkel,
Here.
Chair Orsic,
Here.
and the record will reflect that members Alt, Golan, and Bradley are not present.
Okay, we're good to go. All right, item 2 is public comment. This is the time of the evening where anybody in the audience who wishes to may address the Village Council on items not on the agenda. So if you'd like to talk to us about anything except for the comprehensive plan, you're welcome to come on up and share your thoughts with us. Seeing none, I will close public comment for non-agenda items, and I'll move forward with the review of the proposed comprehensive plan. Okay, tonight the Plan Commission, representatives from the Lakota Group and village staff will be reviewing the Winnetka Futures 2040 plan, the proposed comprehensive plan for Winnetka as recommended by the Plan Commission. This evening, Council will provide feedback on the plan. The Council will only be discussing the plan this evening and would consider introducing an ordinance to adopt the plan at a future Council meeting. So there's no vote, we're just batting it around. Okay. Community Development Director David Schoen will lead us off this evening, followed by Plan Commission Chair Bridget Orsic, and then Scott Ferris with the Lakota Group. After we hear from those three, we'll move to public comment, and then we'll, at the table here, we'll all roll up our sleeves and do whatever it is we need to do. I also wanted to say, too, I just thank all of you for the work on this thing. I mean, I don't know how many comprehensive plans take, what, over 3 years? Thank you, COVID. But, I mean, the countless hours that the commission put in on this thing is just amazing. And as some of you may know, I was lurking in a lot of the meetings on Zoom just to make sure things were going well, and I was just really impressed with the amount of detail and the overall attention the group had and the intensity in working on this. It was just fabulous. And, you know, Scott, you did a great job, you and your team. I always had hoped that this would be a vision for the community by the community. And I know you guys turned over just about every rock you possibly could have to bring this thing home for us. And it shows, because there's a lot of interesting ideas there that I haven't seen in the regular conversation, which means you're getting a lot more ideas and opinions, and that's really what we want, is, you know, this really is a plan for the people, by the people, right? I mean, we're just kind of the stewards of it as far as that's concerned, and just making sure that I's are dotted and T's and crossed. And, you know, with the Plan Commission's good work, plus a 6-0 unanimous decision to send it over to us, I think they all feel pretty good about the work to date. So I'll go ahead at this point and turn it over to David, and we'll go from here.
Thank you. This evening we are excited to present to you the proposed comprehensive plan as recommended by the Plan Commission. Some of you may remember the call to work on a new comprehensive plan started in 2018 when the Village Council included funds in the fiscal year 2019 budget to hire a consultant to help the village prepare a new comprehensive plan. Over the summer of 2019, with the assistance of the Plan Commission chair at that time and the Zoning Board of Appeals chair, we reviewed consultant proposals and interviewed consultant teams. In the end, the interviewed team determined that the Lakota Group's approach to preparing a comprehensive plan best fit our community. In particular, their unique approach of identifying and engaging the community through persona groups, which are segments of the community based upon their general life stage or the length of time they've been in the community. We then started the work on the plan in 2019, and as President Rintz mentioned, we put it on hold in the spring of 2020 due to the pandemic. Then in mid-2021, we started once again to work on the plan. Scott Freris will summarize the overall process as well as how the community was involved with the preparation of the plan. The many hours of work the Lakota Group and their team of sub-consultants put into the plan provided staff and the commission with the information and community voice to assist staff and the commission with preparation of a plan that reflects the community. They gathered and presented data about the community. They talked with community members and summarized those discussions. And along the way, they prepared documents for you and the Plan Commission to review. At every step along the way, staff reviewed and edited every document before it arrived at a commission or council meeting. The consultant team provided us with the time and resources to prepare a plan that takes into consideration the many voices of the community. Most of what is included in the plan, the council has seen before. In December 2021, the council reviewed the existing condition report, which included data and information about the community, as well as what we heard from community members through our community conversations. Then in July of 2022, the Plan Commission presented to the council their visioning work in which they identified an overall vision for the community, visions for various community pillars, and the goals and initiatives to achieve those visions. During the fall of last year, through in-person and online open houses, community members overwhelmingly let us know that the draft vision and goals found in the visioning document are in line with their future vision of the community. The existing conditions report and the visioning work are the basis for the plan that is presented to you, which are based upon what we've heard from community members regarding their vision for the community. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Chair Orsic to say a few words about the Commission's work on the plan.
Thank you. Good evening, President Rintz and village trustees. This evening, I am happy to present to you, on behalf of the Plan Commission, the Winnetka Futures 2040 Plan, the proposed comprehensive plan for the village. The draft plan is a culmination of the community's work, which started in the fall of 2019, just before the pandemic. As we all know, the work on the plan was put on pause while we adjusted our daily lives. Though we were disappointed at first, that pause provided us with the opportunity, through the work of our consultant team, to hear a second time from residents, business owners, institutions, and the development community through a series of focus groups, stakeholder meetings, meetings with village boards and commissions, and Jefferson dinners. In addition, we held 2 community open houses, both in person and online, to provide community members an opportunity to share with us their vision for Winnetka. The commission itself spent 13 meetings working on the comprehensive plan, all of which were open to the public. Those 13 meetings did not include the 2 joint public meetings the commission held with the council to discuss work on the plan. Through the outreach and public meetings, we gathered and discussed many ideas and opinions and believe we are presenting you with the community's vision for Winnetka's future. The pandemic experience provided us with a special opportunity to reflect on what elements make Winnetka the community it is and what we would like it to be in the future. While the ways we live our daily lives, such as working, shopping, and communicating with each other, were impacted by the pandemic, the future vision for the community remains the same. Winnetka, the beautiful land, is a treasured North Shore lakefront village with easy access to the Chicago Metropolitan Center. Our community is committed to the stewardship of all its natural resources, its built environment, and to its family-friendly heritage of educational excellence, vibrant and walkable core areas for commerce and community gathering, active and engaged multi-generational citizenry, housing for all stages of one's life, pedestrian-friendly, safe, and tree-lined neighborhoods. How we go about maintaining and enhancing these elements of Winnetka, which create our sense of community, will always be changing. Change is inevitable. Though the change we experienced during the pandemic was accelerated, and the jury is still out on what changes will remain with us, we experienced an unforeseen event, and we know that there will be more. So we present to the council a plan that addresses what the community needs to think about to prepare for the next 15 to 20 years. We present it knowing that ever-changing technology will impact how we live our lives, and that issues may become the community's focus that we did not see on our horizon when we prepared the plan. The 2040 plan must be thought of as a living document, a work in progress. Over the next 15 to 20 years, we may need to address issues identified in the plan earlier than we anticipated. An identified initiative may become moot due to changing technology, or a state or federal mandate may require us to spend time, resources, and energy on an issue we had not contemplated. Many community members have shared their ideas regarding goals and initiatives the village should pursue. It is based upon common themes we heard from community members as to what we want our community to be. Not every idea shared has been incorporated in the plan, but if one looks through this comprehensive document, they may find that their issue is addressed in some fashion or another. The plan addresses what the community needs to think about to prepare for the next several decades. It is not a list of mandates and requirements. To achieve our overall vision for the community, the plan identifies 10 pillars with goals and initiatives that the village and community partners can explore and work towards. The plan is just the beginning of our work to create a vision. As we considered the proposed plan, community members spoke with us on issues such as lakefront development, parking in the commercial districts, and the proper zoning of parks and open spaces. The plan does identify those and other important community issues that we should take steps to address. For example, regarding the regulation of open space land uses and institutional land uses, the plan identifies studying the proper zoning for each. The plan does not say what that zoning may be, but to study it and consider whether changes should be made. What we have heard from the community is that we must respect our community's heritage, its natural resources, its built environment, and most importantly, its people. We can continue to honor Winnebago's heritage while also accommodating opportunities for existing and new community members to find new and different opportunities to live, work, shop, dine, and play. We believe that the plan we present to you this evening does just that, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts. Now I will turn it over to Scott Ferreras and his colleagues from the Lakota Group to talk about how we got to today and the plan structure.
Good evening, everybody. I too want to take a moment to thank you all for your confidence in our company. The Lakota Group and my team, Becky and Siraj and Alexis and Josh and Andy and our sub-consultants, to be a part of a what is now categorized in our office the longest running comprehensive plan. I'm doubly thankful for the opportunity because I am a resident of this town. And by virtue of being a resident of this town, I got to understand the dynamics of what makes this a great place from the ground up into creating policy. And that's interesting because in a lot of other communities that we work around the country creating comprehensive plans, you really don't know the community. You try to know the community, but you can only get so far and so deep. In this process, I, like you, live here. I see these things, and when we spent the time to shape and work with the Plan Commission and listen to the community, it was heartening to hear the commitment from people and the love they have for this place. And it's defined by everybody in different points of view. There's always sensitivities that we need to be aware of, and we listen to those. But this plan truly is built from community voice. And it's built from community voice pre and post pandemic, which is a unique perspective. It's built from a wide range of cohorts. As David pointed out, our approach to this project was one of listening to and identifying the different spectrums of life in our community, from young to old. We have to understand that this plan isn't just for us today. It's for future generations behind us and us looking forward and guiding them. And ultimately, this plan, which I'll speak about its reason for being, is it's a guide. It is not a mandate. It is not an official direction to do anything specific, but to be prepared to address the issues that will come before us. And as Chair Orsic said, there are ones we don't even know that are going to hit us. And it's an evolving document, and it's going to change, and it's going to move. And therefore, it was created with the idea that initiatives were goals to achieve, not necessarily mandates to hit on a certain timeline. The document itself, I want to talk a little bit about, and that is, it's a comprehensive plan. It is a vision for the future. It's crafted by voice. It defines goals and objectives, and it sets initiatives for this leadership and future leadership to move forward over a 10 to 20-year time period. So it's a long-term process, but it's really used as a guide for community dialogue and ultimately making policy and making decisions to move forward on things. Within it, and what you'll create out of it, are specific agendas, action items, and I would say specific plans that you'll want to work on. Interestingly enough, we've had the opportunity, as we've developed this, to work on, with Trustee Dearborn, the Green Bay Trail Master Plan. That is a specific action that comes out of the initiatives that are built into here. Why? We want to improve our quality of life. We want to improve our walkability in our community. We want to link ourselves to a broader, bigger spectrum of connectivity amongst the communities. That will define a specific action item and specific agenda components that we will build into it. We will have specific tasks to do, and we'll have dollar amounts to them. So that comes out of the comprehensive planning process. And just wanted to point that out so people can understand that this is an evolving document. It'll be added to, it'll be debated, and it'll be updated regularly. As you have heard, and as we've mentioned before, this was a 4-year process. 3 phases of that process led us to analyze, listen some more, and listen again. And the listening doesn't end tonight. The listening continues forever. You all as leaders know that, and it's important. It's important to use this as a benchmark, but to continue to listen to what people are saying and what their concerns and ideas are. And there are a lot. And that's what makes this town strong. There's a lot of great ideas that came out of this process. And ultimately, we crafted that down into a defined set of standards. I want to point out, David spoke to this and Bridget spoke to this about the number of stakeholders. We invited over 900 folks into the conversation. We had 25 different focus groups that moved through the process. And while I talk about these, some of these occurred pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, and some of them doubled up in that process. So we talked to the same people twice to find out what had happened in their worlds. We conducted 3 Jeffersonian dinners, which is a big part of our structure. Those were really geared around hitting hot topics and letting them be debated around a table. We found those to be super, super helpful and help build community and conversation. We had 3 village-wide events in terms of both online surveys and open houses. I think the value of open houses and having that dialogue is critical. People came, they voiced their thoughts, their ideas, they marked up our boards and images and said, this works for me and this doesn't work for me. And all of that was factored into the conversation that we brought back to the Plan Commission over 13 different working sessions. And kudos behind the scenes to David and Ann and the staff. What people don't see is a weekly dialogue and modifications and revisions and rewrites that happened on a weekly basis throughout the last 4 years. So huge, huge amount of work. These guys were merciless in editing and checking and editing and checking. So recognize a lot of people are involved in this. We see ourselves as more of the script to help write, but it was fashioned by so many different voices in this process. We spoke to all the commissions along the way, again, pre and post-pandemic, to make sure we were hearing the topics that were of importance to them in their regulatory roles in the village. And then we clearly spoke to council along the way, as noted, at different touch points to let you know what was happening, making sure that we were bringing forth a plan that was meeting all the objectives of the community. Emails, dialogue, outreach, farmers markets, super, super important. Now, what came out of that? And we put this up here all the time because this was the foundation for conversation in the community. These words were the resounding words that came up over and over again. You'll find them spread out throughout all the dialogue in this document, but they also help form the pillars in terms of how we thought about those. Educational excellence, probably the highest hit of all things. That's why people are here. This place has something very special to offer. This place is authentic. We have a real community, a real town. We're not trying to build one new. We're trying to protect it. We're trying to take care of it. We're trying to enhance it for the future. Heritage was a big word. Heritage and respect for the heritage. Respect it, but understand what we need to do to take care of it and allow it to change gracefully over time. Super, super important. Community of neighborhoods and talking about how it's so important that we each have our sense of place, but we all come together in these gathering places that are our downtowns, our commercial, vibrant commercial business districts. Community, an important word. There's that word lakefront. We're hearing it today loud and clear. I think all of you are, but lakefront community came up. That word, lakefront, was a bellwether for people to connect what we have that's unique to this community. And certainly vibrant businesses and making sure that we support them, that we understand what's necessary to keep them, and to look forward to enhancing those districts as we move forward. Bridget talked a little bit about the vision statement. I won't elaborate on it, but it's strong, it's cohesive, and it's comprehensive in its approach. It touches all of the components of our community, those built off of those touch point words that you saw. The pillars, as we crafted this and we thought about this, we took it to a little bit different approach. I'm proud of the way that these are structured because they speak to our community. They don't speak to standard stock comp plan, this is how you do it. They speak to our community and they address the concerns that are important to who we are. Quality, livable neighborhoods, community of heritage and placemaking, educational excellence, infrastructure services and technology, civic engagement. You know, you think about that, like that is a critical part of our community. We're looking at it right tonight. This is what makes it work, volunteerism. And how do we keep that going in our community? How do we build that for the future? Vibrant business districts, sustainability and climate action rose to the top of a concern, and you'll see the topics that are related to sustainability spread throughout all the pillars in different ways. Healthy and engaging lifestyle, speaking to that age cohort spectrum. How do we deliver a healthy lifestyle to all people in our community, particularly with regards to accessibility, mobility and accessibility, and operational efficiencies and regional coordination? That speaks to the bigger conversation of who we are and how do we work with the agencies and communities that are around us. We structured this very simply. We structured a document that I hope you'll find graphically rich and interesting to read, because we didn't want it to be something that you had to read through thousands of paragraphs to find something. Charts, graphics, illustrations, and pictures speak volumes, and I think they work very well for this community. I'm shocked that it's 300 pages long. We thought we could make it less, but we'll come to what's important in just a minute, and that is our implementation section. That's the workbook that moves forward with leadership. But it's structured around the pillars, and the pillars speak to goals that are built into it, that were crafted, and underneath each of those goals are specific action strategies or initiatives. You heard in the dialogue, you heard from President Rintz tonight, they encompass the policy and the idea, but they don't give a direct action. They allow it to be debated, touch-pointed, studied, and then moved forward into what would be an action, a strategy, or an ordinance. Those are the tools that will help move some of these ideas forward, and that's super important. And the structure, as I mentioned, works off of the idea that we have a statement to the pillar, and from the statement and the pillar in the document, there's illustrations of the data and community voice first represented. So we are going back to the beginning when we had the state of the community, what we heard and what we found. We're sharing that again to support the pillar, and then we're diving into the components that speak to the goals. And then from the goals, we structure it around the individual initiatives. We talk about what the goals of those initiatives and the specific policies that are in those initiatives. And those initiatives then become the components of our implementation matrix, the back portion of this document. Those are the policies and initiatives to move forward with as a work plan. Now, you've noticed in there, We've established what I would call, and again, this is a draft document, we've established priorities and we've established levels of importance, none of which have been debated, but are really meant for leadership to debate and work with staff to craft what are important, what are the ones we want to tackle, and where do they align with certain policies and other issues that are happening within our community. We'll come back to that in just a bit. We also speak to the fundamental goals of addressing land use, and a comprehensive plan does just that. It speaks to the land use mix and fabric and direction of a community. Well, we're a community of built-out land use, but we have some areas susceptible to change, areas where we know that there are things happening that we should get ahead of. And while we don't have a solution and a specific action or proposal before us, we need to get ahead of these areas and understand what is the appropriate land use we should be thinking about, and should we change that future land use mix. And in the areas of our downtown areas, we looked at the idea of creating a mixed-use district. It's a topic that you're already working around right now. It's a topic that you're discussing as part of zoning strategies and PUDs, but there are certain areas in the community where mixed use tends to lend itself and support the transit-oriented nature of our train stations and supporting additional housing and supportive retail in those areas. Now you'll note in our conversation, and so important in that future land use section, is the importance of understanding transitions between our neighborhood and these areas of mixed-use commercial or our downtowns. We need to think about those buffers. We need to think about those character relationships, scale, massing, and form. We may need to address our regulatory mechanisms to strengthen that conversation and make sure it's clear and understandable what we're trying to get to. We need to also understand about, and the very last conversation, super important, as we move forward in thinking about mixed use in some of our future development opportunity areas, they lend themselves to understand how parking is needed and supported in our downtown areas, and particularly village-owned parking. And there's dialogue and there's narrative that speaks to the necessary need to keep that parking built into future development as we move forward. Think of it as a parking strategy. We don't know what it's going to be, but we got to make sure it's there. And we got to make sure it's there and it's effective for the businesses that are still operating in that area. That's built into the narrative and built into some of the initiatives that you'll see in the plan. And the implementation chapter is, as I described, a workbook and needs to be regularly updated, and it is a guide to help us track our programs and our issues that we want to address at both a low, medium, and high level of prioritization. We specifically, the Plan Commission specifically, did not take a deep dive on that. Rather, they said, you know, I think this is something that the board should get a handle on, but they should also vet it with staff and better understand the dynamics of capital budgets and where resources, both from manpower and financial resources, play into the conversation of making these decisions with regards to prioritization. We set up time frames for these priorities: high priority within a 3-year frame, medium priority within a 3 to 10, low in a 10-year plus. We identify our partners. We identify grant opportunities that may be subject to some of these particular initiatives. I won't speak to this, but I will speak to this number because I think it jumps out at people. Oh my God, there are a lot of initiatives. There are 186 initiatives, but make it known that of the high, medium, and low, a number of those are already ongoing initiatives that you're tackling, that you're addressing, are already in motion. Not all of these are brand new. So it's not like, oh my God, we're never going to get through this. And frankly, this is over a 10, 20-year timeline, and some of these may fall off the tree and some of them may stay on, and we may add more. We built them around the idea of at least having certain levels of priorities to start with and a basis for the conversation that you can build off of as a board. So that is, and I tried to move through that quickly. But that is a summary of our draft comprehensive plan. We are super excited to have a conversation with you about it. We recognize there's other moving targets and initiatives in the community that we may need to address, but we're very, very proud of this document and super thankful for the team that we were able to work with to craft. This was a lot of work and a labor of love, so thank you.
Thank you, Scott. All right, where do we go from here?
Did you say you wanted to take public comment at this time?
Scott's done with his
Yes,
portion of the,
yep.
yes. So, all right, we'll go ahead and open this up to public comment then. Would anybody like to speak on the comprehensive plan this evening?
Hi, my name is Teresa Lucas. I pretty much know everyone in here. Good Grapes, 821 Chestnut Court. I'm going to start with, I was told I was a glutton for rejection by coming here. So we went to the 3 meetings. I want to start with that. And I was glad to hear how important parking is. I would just tell you that wasn't the experience at the meetings and our input. And so there's a high level of frustration. And then the other thing I would say is I listened to the numbers is, as a business owner, like I do events, right? We have the street closed. If I don't get the turnout for the event and a customer says, gosh, I wish I would have known about that, that's my job to fix. Like I need to figure out how we missed it, like how they didn't know about it. So I believe I just heard the number that 900 people participated, 4 business owners. And so when we sat down and talked about it, because some of you who know me better than others, I'm kind of like, you can't complain if you don't show up. Like, you just can't. You've got to show up. And the disconnect on understanding, just to tell you what my understanding of why there was such a low turnout level, because I think that's low. I think it's embarrassingly low that only 4 business owners were there, is the understanding of the futures plan and how it impacts them. And I don't even know if I'll be here. And the understanding of it's not, nothing's going to happen till 2040. It's how do you build to get there? So I just wanted to share some of that dialogue internally with us that we had. And so in the first 3 meetings on this, I was with Stephanie. And then tonight's kind of like, well, it's not going to happen. So when we went to the 3rd meeting on the vote for whether or not to, present this to the village council, we kind of we expected it to be approved, based on what happened in the first 2 meetings. What the surprise was the rationale. And again, I know you guys have worked, I'm confident it's hundreds of hours. I know that this is not a light thing to do. And so I just kind of want to step through that because at the end, in one of those pillars is civic engagement, right? And so, you do always get the same frequent flyers, not always, but, unless you get a hot topic like the beachfront, is, the consistent, you don't understand what a work plan is. We do. Yeah, let me just say that, we do. One of us is a former Deputy Attorney General of Delaware, and one of us has worked in a prior life, meaning corporate, not existential. I'm working on future plans. So I just think you should kind of, if you don't know us, maybe give us a little bit more benefit of the doubt of what our knowledge is. And then the second is how much it was downplayed. That, the village council may not even use this, and and, it's, a 17-year plan. Well, then, why was there so much discussion on it, right? It didn't align. And then the third is also, which was kind of the most attention-grabbing in that discussion was, the words were, if the village council, if the parking issue, how did this go? When there's a parking issue and the village council chooses to address it, they may or may not use the plan. The parking issues are now. And that was shared in the meeting. You had the steward of a 90-year-old bookstall tell you that customers are telling her they couldn't park, so they went and ordered online. I'm telling you, my customers can't park in front of the building or in the parking lot, and part of the reason, I believe, as I've tried to survey, is the residents in multi-use buildings aren't zoned, so they're competing for consumer parking. And that includes on Chestnut Court and includes in the consumer park. So they're here and now. And this plan is robust and it's full. So if you implement part of it, it's going to be exasperated. I know, Chris, I saw your watch check. But you know what? We show up. So I'm just trying to tell you what it was like in those meetings when we walked away. And then the other thing that was stated was that the document doesn't say to do anything. Well, that's not actually true. If you look at page 100, it says to do 3 things. An architectural survey, which we wanted a parking survey, revised code from 2003. There are 3 things on that page alone. So I didn't agree with that. And then, no, nor did anyone else, I didn't get everything I wanted. Well, if we're keeping score, we didn't get anything we wanted. I mean, so, I get everyone didn't get everything they wanted. We didn't get a comma changed or anything. I mean, out of adjective. And then the third, that additional is the plan's not perfect. And I get that, and no one expects it to be perfect, but there is a difference between not being perfect and knowingly moving forward with a plan that has false data. And the Hinsdale case study is what is in this plan is false. And it is not how Hinsdale solved their problem. And as the Plan Commission worked so diligently and appropriately on making sure the definitions of various things were correct because the plan had to stand on its own, well, it also has to stand on its own for the Hinsdale parking example. And if we're going to, twice when we're in there, the housing data from 2017 was brought up, saying, it's dated. It was dated, but it wasn't wrong. And it just seemed like parking just kept getting swept aside. The example for the Hinsdale parking case study is wrong. And for those who don't know that, it's because after we read it, we kept talking about it, couldn't figure out how it worked, like how that actually worked. So I spent 30 minutes on the phone with the assistant village manager of Hinsdale. And this is not how they solved it. And so it just felt like, again, it just like that parking wasn't important. And then the document needed to be handed off at some point, absolutely. This is probably the longest document the village has ever worked on because of COVID. But we showed up for the first 2 meetings. We gave really specific feedback. And so there was time to change it. And then, the kind of ultimate was, so after everyone went around and voted, yes, we want to move forward, which we expected, then there was some last minute change requests, and some of it was swapping pictures on 2 pages. That's how low our input ranked. We'd rather get these pictures fixed than work with the business owners on figuring out how to attach this. So I was surprised pleasantly how much parking was addressed by 2 of the prior speakers. So as was shared at the prior commission meeting, because we don't feel like we were heard, and in particular, the train, bus, bike, walk-in just seems like cookie cutter. And we don't understand how it applies to this village, because also in the document, it talks about high-end goods, fine dining, et cetera. And so those 2 things do not seem connected. So if you go forward with that, who are the people that are going to take the bus to dinner or to walk in? And so after much discussion, because it's a big project, we have over 10,000 unique customer email addresses, and we're going to conduct a survey. Because we feel that watching, and I don't want to go to other hot topics, obviously the beach and all that, that it seems like when residents show up and voice that it's taken a little bit more seriously than we show up. So we're working on it, and we'll be very diligent in it, and then we'll come and present it, and we hope as revenue impacting decisions are made, because that's what parking is to us, is revenue impacting, that there's real data for it. And I get that this is a high-level plan, but the lack of connection for the bus, bike, train, walk-in, and saying where the businesses are growing, we don't see those consumer bases connecting. I don't know if you're going to put a picture on the back of your bike. Yeah, I mean, no one's going to put wine and get on the bus. I mean, and so when we really started going through in West Elm, the businesses, we couldn't really figure out, other than the coffee shops and the juice shop, who would bike. I mean, dinner, shopping, I don't know. So, and we also know that we may be really surprised, in particular with the younger influx of people coming in. So we're working on that, and we'll be as careful as we can about it. And we'll share the output. So just like it's not, we're not using a sophisticated tool because that costs too much. So there's no nested questions, and so it's taking a bit more. And the editor's not like the hottest thing. I'm sure it was built in this century, and after these benches, which are from 1860. So we'll do that, and we're hoping to get it out by mid to end of April, just because some people are for spring break going places. And we're going to have multiple reviews of it. We know how careful we need to be, and that we don't want to set the questions up for answers that we want. We really don't. We want to actually get input. And then my last comment, and I know I'm over 3 minutes, is on civic engagement. So I think I mentioned, I follow the beachfront just because it's so complex and interesting to me. And I'm the complexities are interesting to me. And I know in watching some of those, you have people in the audience, I don't know what you call it, we didn't know about it. And, and that came up at the last meeting also, a resident saying, I nor no one knew about this. And I think rather than saying to them, we did everything we could, we've sent it out, that I feel like, again, it's like if I don't have a successful event, how do we push that data? And I don't know what you can put in here, but the QR code I saw on that sign, if a solution to solve it would have been saying, go solve that, and it would have diffused the situation. Instead, now those residents that were there from the Muse are all over like our parking study, and we're very careful on this is exactly what we're doing. We are not doing anything behind that. So I would just say from experience of having events that didn't go as well, is it's really a push. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Teresa. Would anybody else like to speak? Hearing none, we'll close public comment, and now we'll bring it back up here and see where we want to go. Did you guys have any thoughts on how we approach this at this point?
Well, this evening, we've presented the plan, and we wanted to hear from the council and provide the commission an opportunity to respond to any comments or thoughts you may have about a particular issue
Okay,
identified in the plan.
so we're going to open up the kitchen table. Who's got thoughts, ideas, questions, answers, changes, everything? Just let her rip.
My first thought is, as most of the things that go through the commissions, that come to the board, if it's unanimous approvals, I go towards the lower boards. All the work you've done over 3 years is great. And it's a lot that goes into this. I'm not about to pick a word here and there. I trust the 6-0 vote, or whatever the number was. I think it was 6, maybe probably more. So I really think it's a great document, and it's been well thought out, and as much input from the public that could be asked for. Obviously, everyone in the village doesn't want to go to those things or don't realize the importance of it. But the people that do, a lot of times, are the same people all the time. But there's still vocal people you listen to. And I'm sure that they've been listened to, and at least the thought's been put into the document somewhere. So, thanks.
Others? Go ahead.
I've read a few of these in different forms. It's a very polished document. I guess 3 years will do that to you. Very well thought through, organized. I like that it and I understand what John's saying, where obviously there's a little bit of motherhood and apple pie, which is what these are, but there's some also specifics which are great, which we can dig into. There are a lot of number ones in there. I counted 84, not 74.
It's supposed to be a 20-year plan, and half of it's in the first 3 years.
So we can't meet nightly, but no, I mean, I do take, as I looked at those, though, you're right, a lot of them are already going, streets, I mean, things are already happening, things are moving, so I take solace in that. I think it was nice that it also reaffirmed that the residents feel the direction you're coming out at is about the heritage and where we are. Of course we want change, of course we want to be updated, of course we want our school, we have to change with the times, but without the firm grasp what this is saying on the heritage of what this is, because it concerns, as I look at this, and I have children now that live here, and people want to live here very much. They pay a lot of money to live here, and then there's an element that comes here and say, now that I'm here, I want everything changed. This is the way I want to do it. And so there's an element to that where you just, without this kind of a broad view to say, this is what we really believe in, you can kind of get swept away one way or the other, that people that get here to be here, but don't want to change what we have. And I think they just have to live here and understand, we're going to change, and we need to change, but there's elements of heritage that have to stay. And you've covered a lot of those elements of what is really good to and what makes this community so spectacular to live in. Those are the key elements. Obviously, I've taken notes on out of the 84, which I think we can move on, first, or I'd like to move on, which we'll all talk. But it's, you needed to set the table. You did a very nice job setting the table for us to then keep pulling it together. So very nice done, very well.
Can I just add one comment regarding the initiatives and something that Scott didn't address, and that is, as you will see in the plan, there's a lot of cross-references between initiatives, and that's because in the quality livable neighborhood, we talk about making sure to have sidewalk paths to schools and making them pedestrian-friendly, and we repeat that same theme in the mobility.
Yeah.
So there are a number of those that are repetitive. The other thing in which you're not,
Don't soft sell it, David.
pardon?
Don't soft sell it. There's a lot of work in there.
No, there is. When the Plan Commission asked, is this doable? My answer was, it's very ambitious. But there is also, it's not unusual to find in a comprehensive plan, is there's some things we need to do with our development regulations. And so a number of those initiatives relate to that, relate to looking at our zoning regulations in terms of accessory structures, because we're seeing things that 20 years ago you didn't see people have outdoor kitchens and outdoor living rooms with TV sets in their backyard. But that's just one of the many dealing with development regulations. So zoning, subdivision, our certificate of appropriateness, and not only the regulations themselves, but the processes we use. That what we heard from the boards and commissions is let's stop and look at those processes and see what still is relevant for those processes and what can we change. So a lot of those, there are a number of them, but there are a number of them that are interrelated that will be addressed if we take on a comprehensive update to our zoning ordinance and subdivision regulations. So I do appreciate it. It is very ambitious, but there are a number of them that are interrelated.
I wanted to add two other quick things. One is I'm a little head scratching on parking, on the comments that we just heard. This council, I know all of you, spend a lot of time, it's very self-evident what we talk about parking. I'm the liaison to the chamber. This morning's meeting, we were talking about the music festival and businesses that have business that people aren't going to the fest, but they need to get into that area. And so I called Rob, and we're all over it. But this, we spend a fair amount of time saying how do we make these businesses work and how do we make life easier for them. So I'm a little head scratching on some of those thoughts because we think about it all the time. And the other part, which I kind of begs to things we have to look at. Things do change a little bit, and sometimes, usually for the good, sometimes for the worse. And as we talk about zoning, things are happening in the community that probably you wouldn't have seen 20 years ago, 15 years ago, with the magnitude of build and how it impacts neighbors. And I think that I like where you were going, where you're talking about how things affect neighbors and how, because in the past, people just kind of wouldn't have done that. And now it's within the realm of doing. People are doing it, and so we just have to look at those codes again and to make sure that neighbors truly aren't impacted negatively while letting people don't get me wrong, they want to build a big house, God love them. But if it's really starting to impact neighbors, I think we have to look at that even within our current zoning codes.
Yeah, I
Thanks.
think there were a couple clauses
Yeah.
about being consistent with the neighborhood feel, scattered throughout. Thank you, Chris, scattered throughout. So yeah, I like it.
Yeah, another example of stuff that comes up, even if it's not in this plan, stuff still comes up that we address, like the PUD process. 20 years ago, that was never thought of. It came up, we say, hey, there's got to be a better way to do this, and we did it. So
Well, and
other
it-
things will come up aside from these initiatives.
And interestingly enough, John, I think that there's been a shift in the mindset too. That when those original requirements were put in for go to zoning, go to DRB, go to plan, go to here, go to there, that there was almost a message that don't bother. And if you do bother, this is the gauntlet of meetings and hearings you're gonna have to go through.
Yeah.
And I think, I was around kind of at the end of that thought process, and there was a lot of people that just said, if somebody wants to change something, they're gonna have to work for it, and they're gonna have to work really hard. And it was a very aggressive sort of position, but people wanted to keep things exactly as they were.
Right.
Which I thought was interesting, because there was one thing, I do have a question for you guys. There was a mention about one of the processes that requires plan and zoning, and there was a suggestion to find another process for that. And I was just curious, which is it special use? Is it, I'm trying to figure out what the Plan Commission was pointing at when they made the statement that they wanted to streamline yet again. And maybe there's another permit process out there that I'm not aware of.
So the one that was specifically identified in the plan was regarding in the commercial business districts.
That's what it was, yeah.
If you're not located in the overlay district and a business needs a special use, it has to go before the Plan Commission and the zoning board. And there's other other uses, mainly the institutional uses, that have to go through both too. So the thought is, do we reflect on those processes and see how we may adjust those? And in the end, we may decide not to, but from their experience, and I'm speaking for you now, is that there's times when these items are going both before both bodies, and there is the question of, is there the need for that?
Right. Go ahead, Mark.
I just thought I'd throw something in here because we're talking about neighborhood feel, and just changes in terms of what people are doing these days. And I wonder whether there's some way to put in the plan some principles and what that guide when there aren't exact rules for something. I mean, we have some very broad-based, like we want to be a beautiful land and a wonderful neighborhood. Obviously, it goes a lot deeper than that. But there's a lot of room between that and if you have outdoor bulbs, they will be no greater than 65 watts and they will aim in this direction. There needs to maybe be some, a set of principles that any, whether it's a village employee acting on our behalf or a board acting on our behalf, that they can look at a set of principles and say, does this alteration, does this use case, is it in keeping with these principles, or is it really flaunting these principles, even if it meets the letter of a very specific rule, right? Because we try to make rules that actually cover everything, that don't let people do things that are crazy and encourage people to do things that are good. And it's tough to create that set of principles, that set of guiding principles, but I think it's worth doing, and we're not super far away from that with this plan, but I feel like we need to bring some elements of the plan down a little bit and look to some of the initiatives and bring them up a little to meet some principles that can guide, some of them might go to whether or not what one landowner wants to do impinges on the rights of another landowner, and in what way, and some guidance on that. Or it might be, some guidance that would, obviously plant material and trees and so forth are a big part of a beautiful land. There's not a lot of discussion of that in the plan, but some guidance that would help, whether it's our village forester or whether it's zoning, as to when people are altering things, are they doing things that are in keeping with, whether it's a building or a landscaping kind of principle. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I think it's a worthy thing to take a look at and at least ask yourself of the plan, does it give those guiding principles? Because if it doesn't, it's either too high or it passes the buck to something really low, like, oh, somebody's gonna work on making rules 24.3A that says, bring your treehouse down by 3 feet. So there's something, because you can't make a rule for everything, and because a lot of times we have a lot of different governmental bodies that are touching something that somebody wants to do, whether it's a business or it's a resident. And so how do those different factions look to a set of rules that helps to so, we're sitting there approving an increase in impermeable surface, but we don't really have any of the engineering, and we don't have a plan. We don't have James Bernal sitting in front of us saying, don't worry about that. We've got that covered and that water won't run anywhere. And so I just feel like we've got some gaps there where we need something, a guiding principle set that could be helpful. I think there's also the second and last thing I would say is, I think it's worth examining the interface between our resident governance groups and our full-time paid stewards of the community. For example, I think that having an intersection between, and maybe I just don't understand it, but a better intersection, for example, between the forester and the decisions the forester makes with regard to plant material in, out, up, down, replacements, and those elements of government that might be, or our resident governance that might be approving or not approving something. The same thing goes for the stormwater. I think there's sort of a pass the buck over to, the village engineer, but I'm not sure that the people that are sitting on that governance body truly understand the implications of what the engineer has the ability to approve or not approve. And so I think just those intersect points, those handoff points, might be better understood.
Those are interesting concepts. They really are. Both of them, I think, are really interesting. To be honest with you though, Mark, I don't think they're the stuff that comprehensive plans are made of. but they are important observations,
Those might be better addressed in the implementation items, granted. The first one, as to, kind of principles, I don't know whether that one is beyond the scope of some
No.
aspect of this.
And you're right. That was a good point. I was going to ask Scott if there is something in there that gives us those overarchings. I mean, I'd be surprised if they weren't in there, but
Yeah, so I'll just bring it up
And maybe
because.
they're worthy of you all taking a close look at them.
Yeah.
If they are there, is that good? Because I almost had to call the forester to ask him if I needed to plant a sapling after I printed it.
There's a fine line, and we discussed this about controlling design. And I think the village a number of years ago, I remember, explored the idea of residential design guidelines.
I've tried it at least 5 times and have been killed every time I bring it
Yeah.
up, so.
Initiative 115 suggests the importance of the architectural character of our neighborhoods, in particular the form, scale, massing, and design. And it suggests, as an initiative, the village may want to consider re-evaluating whether guidelines of some form are an important tool to help solve the equation. And it further goes into in the open space and in the sustainability about landscaping and the character of landscaping and the importance of landscaping, and allowing for the flexibility to provide different forms of landscaping, native and non-native, and more sustainable principles that are built into that. We've had some conversations where some people don't like the prairie look in the next door neighbors, and we've got to resolve that. So that is built into the conversation. It doesn't say go do that. It says we need to address this. This is a concern. This is an issue in order to protect our quality livable neighborhoods. So it was placed under the pillar where we're trying to solve the bigger goal of protecting the quality of each of these neighborhoods, which each of them are different zoning standards, different lot widths, different form, but recognizing that we need to have a little bit more conversation about that. When we had this conversation, those residential design guidelines kind of reared their head, and we said we don't want to go all the way into that conversation. We want to keep this a little bit more general, but we want to make sure it's in there because it's also a heritage discussion, and it also speaks to the bigger term, which we don't really use in here. We use the word heritage, but we don't use historic preservation, because historic preservation seems to have a backlash effect in this town of that we're going to stop things from happening. we value historic resources in our community, but we value the heritage of our community more. And that word is a stronger word to be used as a tool by leadership to guide that conversation than historic preservation. That was the dialogue we had. Yeah.
What about this overarching missive about how we think about things, Mark?
Yeah.
I don't know how you're gonna do that, but I mean, is there something that, you know, that points us in a direction that we should always leave things better than we found them, or, I mean, are there those sorts of things in
That's
there?
written throughout the document and just about in every single pillar. The conversation, I remember having the conversation about the forester's role. And the forester in our community is charged with protecting the asset that is known as our tree canopy. But his role can be so much more in the bigger conversation of preservation of the quality of neighborhoods, protection of landscape character of properties. And so it's actually built into that sustainability section as a topic to consider.
So it's sort of put in there as something we need to address.
It's,
but it doesn't-
it's an initiative to consider building upon and giving staff direction to research it and move forward with. Just like looking at making zoning changes in certain portions of our land uses in the community. We don't have them, but we need to do the research to move forward. Does that make sense? It doesn't specifically
does kick
call
the
out,
can
go
down
do
a
'em.
little bit, down the road a little
Yeah.
bit, and I guess a few of these things I think are pretty important to, while we take our time to get to researching and formulating those initiatives, it'd be nice if in the interim there were some guiding principles that allowed everything that we're doing today, tomorrow, and next week to be in keeping with at least the overall goals that we have. And, you know, you brought up forestry again, I brought it up, you brought it up. It might be just some guidelines that are given either to a governing body or to the forester that says, this is what, you know, this is what it means to have that overall goal in mind.
I think-
So that we don't have anything that deteriorates too much while we're trying to figure out a workable solution through, you know, investigation.
You know, I also
Maybe
think,
it's just
It may not be
expanding,
possible.
well,
maybe it's expanding the fire department's Winnetka Way. I mean, if we're talking about staff, because they've got an amazing
Right.
template that they use for indoctrinating new employees to come in and understanding what it is to work, what's different about working in Winnetka and why we behave a certain way. So maybe it's something like that that just gets expanded.
and I think it may already be in, I mean, I know there's language, I think, Dave, where we talk about, like, changing characters. You can't change the character or elevation of neighborhoods, just like we learned on the lakefront, as Andy pointed out as well, which there's stuff already in there that could protect. And the question is, are we truly looking at it and enforcing it to do what we want already? It may already be in there. I know there's specific language about the character.
Yeah, on page 77, initiative 1.1.5 says, consider creating a document that provides guidance for the scale and form
Yep.
of new single-family residential construction envisioned in Winnetka's various neighborhoods to encourage development that's complementary to and compatible with existing homes, with some guidance. I put a little note on there that I'd also like to see, and this has come up in some of our lakefront discussion, is like Lake Forest has a guideline like that for people who buy a lakefront property. So that's a separate
Yeah.
sort of brochure, but in this case, I would be like, this could be all combined into one document. So one of my notes was there, also add like a chapter on lakefront within that.
Yeah, I'd love to resurrect that document, actually. I mean, we
It was
finished
developed.
in 2009.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well,
So
I
now-
wasn't here then.
No,
I
but
mean, I wasn't here then.
But it's
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
But the thing is that, and after we had these discussions on the lakefront, it occurred to me with that dimension, that it could be something that could ultimately roll into that, but it has no teeth right now. It's just
Yeah, I
a,
want to give it to you.
well, I do too, but. you
It's
know,
guidelines.
Nobody's
It's only-
nobody seemed to have the appetite for it, so
I bet
here we
I bet
sit.
everybody's hungry now.
Well, and Kim, you read the initiative, and the initiative, if you change the language from, we should study and make something that preserves the character,
Yeah.
what you said, if we just elevated that to a principle that we want to, that that is our principle today, okay, overarching. And then when any individual thing comes up that we haven't had the time to address yet, we look at it against that principle and we say, does it pass that smell test? Or is somebody meeting the letter of the law, or are they doing something that we haven't covered with the law yet, and therefore, you know, it moves forward, rather than being judged against that principle, and somebody says, no, we need to hold back on that a little bit, or this is how we can decide.
Yeah,
So,
that's gonna,
anyway,
that's gonna.
I don't need to belabor it.
No, it's a good idea. It's gonna require some thought too, because obviously it's a very subjective standard. You know, and as well as you might have well-intentioned people coming in here pointing out that these are the standards, we can also have people come into this room and beat us over the head with it.
That's true.
I'm not proud of it, but I make a living tearing apart these documents and then marching into council chambers and using it on the villages that I'm trying to get approved by. You just,
Gotta stop
you
people.
take their own plan and go, I'm actually pretty good at it.
And we did get comments on that. March 13th, the emails that we got today,
Yeah.
yesterday.
About context
Point one,
sensitive.
the context, contextually consistent, say that 10 times. And then somebody from the Winnetka Muse wrote this, and it goes back to, you know, who's deciding and that whole issue that
And-
we brought up, so.
In residential architecture, as far as like a
Yes.
design review board or something, 20 years ago, you didn't see architecture like there is now
Yeah.
on some of these homes. You know, the white siding, the whole look is different. And I do a lot of work in other cities across the country, and one of the worst places to work in is Lake Forest.
Yeah.
Of course.
I mean, they have a rule, a Manani rule. You can't build the same house.
Right.
Like a lot of subdivisions might say you can't build in the same block. I tried doing like 2 miles away with a developer. They would not let him build the same house 2 miles away. And they basically redesigned this 2-story house to a ranch. So that's taking the very far end of a design review board,
Right.
Yeah, and
which is what people are scared of, you know. it's
But I
tough.
think that reflects the different communities. I mean, Lake Forest has always been a town that has never been afraid of
But we're trying to make-
micromanaging their residents and
Right.
everything that
But we're also
happens
trying to
there
make, or keep
for the sake of
Winnetka-
preserving their heritage,
to
okay?
keep it buildable.
But in Winnetka, and I've said this 100 times before, we tend to be a little bit more libertarian about this stuff. And we're a little bit less comfortable about saying thou shalt do anything. Now, I'm feeling a turn in the conversation over the past few years, where people seem to be more comfortable telling other people what to do and what not to do.
Right.
But that's something for us to sort out as we go through this, right? I mean, it's just gonna be part of the conversation.
And again, myself being an architect, Winnetka, for the most part, without a design review board, they've got great homes, a great mix. There's a few here and there probably that,
A few.
well, but you also got new ones coming that people are saving older homes, coming in, making them look, you know, keeping up the historical homes and adding
this-
on to them, so.
The scariest thing is now that all the 50-foot lots have been consumed for the most part, and this is what's got your undies in a bunch and your undies in a bunch, is the fact that now all of a sudden, the properties that are being purchased for tear downs are much more substantial. And yes, or either dividing them or leaving them as they are, and then building to the FAR that nobody ever thought that they would build to. I mean, and this is a conversation we had 100 years ago, that .38 is a really aggressive FAR, but it's our FAR, and it always has been. Because nobody thought anybody would ever
Never do,
build
yes.
to a .38, but
Exactly.
there it is, right? Is it 3.8, David?
More than
Our FAR? On the 50s? Is it 38 still? Yeah. But there you go, nobody ever expected
That's
it.
exactly it.
Well, the other thing, Chris, that nobody ever
And when you-
expected is
when you
that
see
people
it,
would come in and
pretty bad.
change the topography as much as they have. We have no rules around changes in topography.
Well, on bigger properties, you have the opportunity to change topography. You're exactly right. I mean,
And
these are the
people-
things that we're
people are
seeing
willing
now.
to bring in truckloads, and we never thought it
But we
just
do that.
never was done
Yep.
before, so
Yep.
we never thought we needed a rule. And I'm not for micromanaging though either. I'm just, maybe the rule is just, don't, whatever increases your use and value shouldn't decrease the use and value of the the people around you. That's a very basic, maybe a basic thing, but, I don't know. I don't know how to solve it. I just know that, I see a gap between what I know this plan is supposed to be in large part is a vision, and the implementation ideas that, some of which are underway, but many of which are not. And there's kind of a gap between the two because the implementation is gonna take a while, maybe years. The vision sits up here with not a lot of teeth, but a lot of aspiration. And how are we gonna cover that middle ground where Winnetka could change in the next 10 years while we wait for 2040 to arrive? So, it's a tough one.
Other thoughts, comments, questions, changes?
Just on Mark's point, it sounds to me a little bit, Mark, like you're looking almost like for an escape hatch. We look out and sometimes you come across something in town and you scratch your head and say, how did that happen? How did that get through or whatever? And it shouldn't have gotten through, but it got through because of it fit the box. And I agree, it doesn't happen too often, but I can think of one very prominent recent example where it has happened, and it's a darn shame because it's so visible as you enter the community. And it went up. I talked to people that are no longer in the village staff about it, and they're just like, we can't believe it, but it
When you have
happened.
larger lots, that's.
But this was a small lot. I mean, and it just, so the escape hatch idea that it just doesn't fit certain
Common sense.
common
Well,
sense.
Context review is the solution to that, but nobody
And-
seems to want it.
And I would think
So,
something like that could filter in some kind of a,
I couldn't even
theme.
get DRB to agree to it.
Well,
When I took
Maybe
the
that's
idea
what
to
this
them
is for.
again, I went back to
well,
it
but
and
maybe there
said,
could be some language in here. But anyway,
yeah.
so,
I'm not sure we need to be afraid of that. I understand what you're saying, that people can use it as a bludgeon in each direction, or we can create risks for ourselves, but you've got communities like Lake Forest who put an iron fist down on things that you might say, can they really do that? And they do. And then we have us, and we leave a lot of things open, or maybe we didn't really leave things open, it's just that the world has changed, and we got guys like Chris and his buddies who can find a way, no, I'm only kidding. But it's just like,
Rat band.
there are things we never contemplated, and so give us something that allows us gives us time to recover,
right.
rather than just say, it is what it is, and someday we'll change it, but whatever happens in between now and then, we can't do anything about it.
It's interesting, I'd like to think that about 25% of my time served on council has been dealing with, oh, we didn't expect that. Or we didn't see that one coming. I think that might just be a natural progression of government, this reactive aspect of it, that we all sit here and we're kind of happy cruising along, and then all of a sudden something happens, and everybody gets crazy, and we gotta do something. It just seems to be the normal cycle of life,
Well,
actually, you know? I mean,
that's how
Kinda like
rules,
banking,
yeah,
Huh?
well, that's,
Kind of like Silicon Valley Bank.
that's how rules, ordinances, and codes become more and more, because something happens that causes someone to relook at a code and ordinance over hundreds of years. If everything was perfect, we wouldn't have any of them. It all started, one sentence, and then it just kept growing.
Yeah, we wouldn't need lawyers.
Right.
There's plenty of them in the room, Ben, so you're not alone here. Right, Bridget?
Well, I got a couple thoughts.
Go ahead.
A couple thoughts and a couple questions. Obviously, a lot is based on, well, a key component is census data that goes into this, and trends and income data and all that. So it is census data, is that correct, that we would use? And I'll tell you where my question's going. I realize that a growing trend is residents who, and there's a lot of discussion of seniors who want to stay in town, who trying to downsize, maintain a residence here, but now their legal residence is in, you name it, Florida, Texas, Wisconsin, Indiana, it's somewhere else. So they wouldn't be counted in this because their census count is now in their state of residence. So may not be a big number, but then our numbers are slightly understated probably for the senior citizens we actually have in town who are living here, who are paying property taxes and have say. Would that, I mean,
Well, there's census, and then there's also the information that came from CMAP in terms of their projections moving forward. So they're taking projections looking forward from a regional perspective. Locally, we did, the first assessment was back in 2017. That momentum of people exiting wasn't really happening quite as fast, but now it is moving faster. But the conversation that came out of those cohorts was there is no housing product, or not enough housing product in our town, and then for that matter, the whole North Shore, to meet the demand of that marketplace who wants to stay.
Want to keep
And not
some-
everybody wants to leave. Some want to stay, they just want to downsize. There is a whole host of them by virtue of the state of Illinois that are running for the hills to want to get out of here for 6 months and a day. That's almost a different group. But what you're seeing happening is the only thing that's meeting that demand right now is rental apartment housing. That's what you're seeing. You can go right down the road to Wilmette, you're seeing them popping up as fast as they can be. So that data is coming off of the information that you're seeing from the housing market reacting to it, census, and CMAP. CMAP projects 2050, I think that,
Well, that was
which is
another
really kind
question.
of
Where
myopic,
And you know what?
but it's still something to look at.
Their projections are
sorry, okay.
no,
Well,
there's
that's,
just no
you
way,
know
there's
what,
no way
I-
you're gonna get 2,000 more units.
No,
More
I get that.
households in this
Yeah.
town.
That was just
That'll
but
be
that's CMAP.
291
Right, they're
welded
gonna-
places.
right.
Yeah.
But
So,
good
I mean,
point.
there was a part of me that hated to even see that fact in here, because sometimes if it's in here, it takes on a life of its own.
Take it
or
for what
whatever,
it's
but-
worth, there is just a growth in that demographic of our community and all the communities that are looking for options and they're not here. And we can choose to address them or not address them or come up with different solutions to it, but that's what it's really pointing out.
Well, the
So-
other, that's sort of feeding into that is, I was just looking into this a little bit. We all know anecdotally people are leaving Illinois, but I saw for the 9th straight year in a row, Illinois is lost residents significantly, and the only state worse than us is West Virginia. So, and then some of the statistics about who's leaving, again, anecdotally, I think we would all know this. The people tend to be higher incomes. I couldn't believe this stat. Between 2019 and 2020, Illinois lost 101,000 residents with $8.5 billion of income. Well, you know what? I'll bet some of those were Winnetka residents, right? So where I'm going with with sort of all that is, how did we look at sort of even that little bigger picture of how Winnetka is fitting into Illinois with this trend that doesn't look like it's going away anytime soon? Maybe it doesn't even change any of our conclusions.
I would rather have the Freedman's folks speak to that specifically, but I don't think it has any real effect materially on our plan.
On our plan.
Yeah.
I just wondered if we sort of bandied that around a little bit. The other thing I thought is, again, echoing everyone's sentiments about, one, this was a very enjoyable and easy read for a 300-page document. Thank you. It was a lot of fun. Fun to read, and I really do think it captured, you know, having lived here 35 years, really captured a lot of thoughts that everybody had then, has now, et cetera. The one thing which we've touched on that, of course, has become a big hot topic lately is what we've all learned about lakefront and the village's jurisdiction and impact on the lakefront. I feel like we don't touch on that enough directly in here. There's a reference in the vision statement to protecting natural resources, and I felt the only place that directly addressed it was this, like, 4 paragraphs here on page 157. I don't think it's too late to sort of revisit that a little bit and expand it based on everything we've learned in the last 2 months to more directly talk about what the village envisions to protect, preserve our lakefronts, our bluffs, the health, safety, and welfare, access, et cetera.
So, and that was something that came up when we presented to the Plan Commission. And we can add something to that effect. We can add
You know,
an
I still
initiative
think
if it's,
everybody else feels
if
about
it's
it.
necessary. Part of the thought was, in our preparation of the plan, we had not had any interaction with the Plan Commission or the council in terms of where they wanted, how they wanted to address the issue. The council, as you know, has recently been discussing the issue, and it's well into it. Next Tuesday, you're gonna adopt your first ordinance amendment related to the issue, and the direction we heard as staff is there's going to be further discussion regarding that issue. So it's definitely on our plate. We can, we'll continue to work on anything, if it's in here or not, that the council gives us direction that may come up as a priority. So why it's not in the document is just our interactions with the Plan Commission and the council were at a point where we felt we needed a little more direction from the council in terms of how they may want us to approach the issue, not the details of the issue, but that, yes. And it was really not until, January,
Yeah.
that the
I-
council decided that
Yeah, I
this is an
realize it's
issue
new
that you
news,
wanted
but-
to take on and move forward with. So
And I was gonna say, we did talk about this, and it came up, and everything was coming, people were realizing that there was jurisdiction where maybe there wasn't before, and we tried to figure out how to put it in, and then realized, also, this is happening right now. Like, we don't need to direct anyone to do this, because it has actively been happening with all the people that have come in and spoken and everything, but I don't think it's a bad idea to put something in there.
Okay, something just a little more direct, I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
So would you suggest visionary language
Yeah, you know-
or technical language or?
Maybe a little more visionary, because again, I think there's just general references to protecting natural resources, but I think maybe something more specific about the lakefront and access and preservation would beef this up. I mean, this would be like writing it after the fact, but so many of the initiatives are very specific, recommending we write this guideline, recommending we relook at zoning, and we don't have a recommendation in there. To David's point, it's already underway, so, I mean,
With David's comments that it's already like in the process, the council's already on it, it's almost like we'd be putting an initiative in the comprehensive plan.
that's
Oh,
already.
by the
yeah,
way,
that's what I
Star,
mean.
we're
But-
currently working on
But I
it.
think the
So it's like it's
principles,
already in our face.
but I do think this document, if it's a 20-year document, putting something a little more beefy in terms of the principles and vision for our lakefront that would stand the test of time, because who knows what we'd be looking at in 5 years, 10 years regarding the
Can you
lakefront.
guys come up with something?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could come up with a goal,
Do you guys
and
agree with that?
I can already start to think of a couple of initiatives in terms of consider and study both the lakeside regulation issue and the landside regulation issue, because that was what we heard from the council at the last meeting, and we can come up with a goal about how important to preserve of those features along the lakefront. So we could come up with a goal and a couple of initiatives for your consideration, which I
That's the
think
only
you've
sort of
given
real
us
big one.
direction elsewhere that we could come up with some wording.
I think we'd want to, I was just thinking about this from two perspectives. As we mentioned before, lots of initiatives and goals cross-fertilize between pillars. And so I think we'd want to be clear about what pillars we're building this conversation into, because it can fall under open space, but it can also fall into quality livable neighborhoods. And we need to make sure we're addressing it in the right way, in the right places, so,
Yeah, I think the open space,
yeah.
at least from where I sit, that's been kind of the overriding, desire.
Okay.
Okay, and one other little thing,
Yeah.
but some of this, I think, is a little bit of a holdout regarding signage and wayfinding. I think since we put a lot in town, we've gotten feedback that isn't necessarily as important to as many residents as we might have thought years ago, and we, received some negative feedback about that. So there's a few recommendations that we continue to increase signage and wayfinding that I don't know if I'd want to act on when I'm sitting in this chair. Anyway, I like the more wayfinding for the Green Bay Trail, though.
Yeah, I was
because
just gonna
admit,
say, we put that in the Green
When I
Bay
take my bike,
Trail.
I'm like, God, where can I get on again? You know, so
Right,
I
not
like
only that,
one.
but
I like
interpretive
that one.
signage, there's a whole bunch going into that Green Bay Trail plan, so you might want to keep it in there.
Yeah, so that one I like, but some of the rest around town, I think
Okay.
we've gotten some feedback that makes so.
And frankly, that desire for that came pre-pandemic.
That's what I'm
And then
saying,
you
yeah.
implemented it as we were moving through the process, so it's interesting.
Everyone's learned their way around town because
Yeah,
they lived here
right.
for 2 years during the
Right.
pandemic.
And I've been a little cynical about the signage too, Kim, but we have to remember that people from outside Winnetka
Yeah.
actually do come here once in a while, right? So it is
So
nice
there's
to
a
point them in
balance,
the right
but I guess-
direction, but there is a balance. There is.
And it's kind of a welcoming thing for visitors to see these signs, I
Yeah,
think.
I mean, some are a little, there's too many.
Okay.
There's too many. We thought there was too many when we approved it, but we just couldn't figure out which ones to take
Which
out.
ones to take out?
So now we're doing it after the fact. Hi, Terry.
Oh, one other question. Going back to parking, I thought I saw somewhere in here, and I put a question mark, but I didn't mark it, that there was a recommendation to consider changing the parking requirements for new residential multi-use buildings. Am I imagining that? Okay,
Multifamily.
which, to me, was that sort of like, well, we would potentially think that someone who needs an apartment, who wants to take a train, might not have a car, so we don't need to mandate it. But then on the other hand, we're hearing that residents who are living in apartment buildings or whatever are using customer parking for businesses. So those two seemed a little, seemed competing to me.
They're interconnected, but
Yeah.
one is an economic development initiative, that is the parking for the businesses. The other is a real estate-driven financial consideration of the developer building, of what they want to
Want to
provide and
provide.
what they can afford to provide and how it all works. And the market is driving those equations. Developers are pushing down when you're close to public transit. They want to get it down to as little as possible. And that may be the case, but in certain marketplaces like ours, people might want to have two cars. More than likely, particularly when they keep one or two here while they're going down to Florida with their other car. So it's not apples and apples, it's different in every town.
Chris?
Yeah.
So another aspect of it is ongoing enforcement and education, because you have built-out apartments in the downtown, and there's designated spots for those residents to park. Need to make sure that those are consistently adhered to, and then during the day, where are they going? A lot of times they're off to work, but when they're not here, usually it's overnight parking and making sure that they're moving when the commerce opens up in the downtown. It's always a work in progress. Depends upon how many new people are coming in, whether they're following the rules, but it really comes down to consistent enforcement. And wherever you can build some extra spaces, you do it.
Although Winnetka, I think we got spoiled because I hate to say I am too, where you used to be able to just kind of pull up
Yeah.
within 4 spots at the bookstall and you're gonna be, and it's just, that's not happening
It's the
anymore.
good old days, Rob, when no one was here.
Good old days. No, I'm kidding, but but people are kind of, people can walk and walk. I mean, I guess there is parking, it's just not directly in front of these,
Well, and that's and look at, I have a different viewpoint of retailers because I'm a landlord. And we could put a freaking parking deck on Elm Street, east of Chestnut, and there still wouldn't be enough parking for everybody to shop wherever they wanted to.
Or people don't want
In
to
that
walk
block.
a block. Right, they don't want to park and walk.
So right.
No.
Yeah, I,
Well, and then there's that too.
So we need electric scooter parking. Empty, right.
right. I go UGG when I got parked in a parking garage to go to Auto. Right? Oh my God, I gotta walk half a block? So it's, right, right.
No, parking is, retailers never have enough parking, and communities don't have enough space to provide what they would all want. So they just, we can only do the best we can do.
Well, and maybe if we do push, bikes and make it easier to lock up your bike, with electric bikes and electric scooters. And my daughter she and her husband bought 2 electric scooters so they can go out to dinner and not worry about having a glass of wine. So I know. Okay, I should like to be quoted on that.
Better walk that one back.
Yeah, I better walk that one back.
And again, that's good for 4 months.
Pardon?
Right,
That's good for 4 months of summer.
right.
Yeah, well,
You
that's
know,
true too.
so.
That's true too.
Yeah, I mean, the parking is a tough issue because we all know that there's a huge price tag associated with it. And there's a sensibility connected to it too. We didn't move here so we can park in underground garages. I mean, that's.
Parking is not a.
A lot of the,
yeah.
it's like the sensibility of CMAP saying there's gonna be 2,000 more units here.
Well,
mean,
when you
it's just
talk to the,
crazy.
when you talk to the community and we engage the community conversation, not one person brought up, boy, I love the parking in this town.
Of course not.
Parking is not a definer of who we are. It adds no value to this community character or spirit. It's a byproduct of having retail. But what people did say was super important to them, pre and even more so post-pandemic, is walking, 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 biking, biking, biking. And invest, invest, invest. That's where we want to see it. Fix those streets, fix those sidewalks. We love walking. Nobody said, hey, get me some more parking.
Were people
Not-
complaining about parking?
Not a single person. But we know, back to sensibility, we have retailers. And in order to
Right.
keep vibrant business districts, we've got to address the issue.
Yep. And there are things we can do to improve the availability of spaces as we go forward. The problem is on the parking issue, Kim, just so you know, I mean, there is a plan that contemplates a built-out post office site
Yes.
that has oodles more parking that isn't here yet.
Mhm.
And we shared this information with our retailers when we did phase 1 of Streetscape. And we even played it out on Nextdoor. What an idiot I was for doing that. But we went through all this, and we are creating a lot of retail spaces here. It's just the job's not done yet. But the retailers want to kind of look at everything today. We actually added that whole parking lot over there, if you remember.
Right.
The north
And
side.
I pay attention to that parking lot every time I come uptown. And there has not been one day when I haven't been able to pull into that parking lot and park on the north side of the post office. Not one day,
I agree.
Yeah.
Same for me.
right?
Right,
I mean,
yes.
It's there, everybody, if you're going shopping in West Elm, everybody wants to park in that one specific area on Chestnut, and if they have to go around the block,
Mhm.
like, because even if you go, just around to Linden, there are spots,
Yep.
a lot of them typically. So, and some of it's time of day, sometimes the day is busy, and the other day I could, because now I'm thinking of it constantly, I was driving my kids home from school, and there was a ton of parking on Elm Street at 30 in the afternoon. Now, when I went for lunch at noon, that was not very much, right?
But you could park within a block
But you
and
could
get where
still
you were
park
going.
within a
Like,
block.
anybody who's going home, who came to buy something and is going home, was not coming to buy something.
right.
They were like, oh, if there's an open spot, I'll swing in, and they would want an open spot a block away.
Yeah.
Because we all drive through every day and go to all the places every day, and I've never gone home because I couldn't park.
No, me
And I've never walked more than a block.
Maybe we should be the first village that has village valet parking.
Oh,
Pacific, now I have a Pacific
Hey,
Palisades has it.
Pomeroy
Now, that
started
would be
for us,
defined,
yeah.
wouldn't it?
But the important thing is we have to be aware of the fact that, parking is a sensitivity to our businesses. They're important residents in this community as well.
Yeah.
And we have to do everything reasonable to make sure that they have what their customers need to get into their stores. So,
And it's unfortunate that we're still hearing that they don't think that we're listening to them. Because we have addressed this multiple times and said, we hear you, we don't want you to think that we don't hear you, we don't understand what you're saying. So to have them still here saying you're not listening to us.
Well, plus you said it twice, or two of you said it in your plan when you talked about it. It's
Yeah.
clearly, it's just a disconnect,
Yeah.
but you're clearly looking at it, we're clearly looking at it. It's important to all of us.
yep.
I'm not,
I'd like to mention parking too, because I actually brought it up specifically in the Plan Commission to address it after the comments at the last meeting. And I said, we do understand it, but some of us are torn also, wanting open space and trying to strike that balance. And to the point of the commenter this evening who has commented the last couple Plan Commission meetings, there has not been a specific request out of that commenter at all. The only comment that was specific at the last meeting was from the owner of the bookstall, and she thought there should be a guaranteed right to parking. That's a judgment call. That's not, we didn't guarantee a right to anything in this plan, so we weren't about to add that one. And that's a big question, what's a guaranteed right? But at least she asked something specific. And by the way, our message also wasn't that you're not understanding the plan, but that not everything that we want or is appropriate, that might be appropriate for guidance or principles, are appropriate for this plan. And I don't know if protecting the right of parking is appropriate for a comprehensive plan. But that was the first time I heard a specific request to protect parking or do anything specific about it in the plan. We did look at it. It's covered in Pillar 2. It's covered in Pillar 8. I also said there's an opportunity to work more with business owners and refer to them more in the plan. There's lots of references to working with residents and getting residential input. There are fewer references to getting business owner input. And I said that's a miss. I do think it's something that still needs to be incorporated. I don't have specific points where it should be. But that was all discussed at the meeting on the 1st also. And then, yes, the pictures were discussed too. That was me also.
But we did have in some, in the implementation plan, we did add business owners in some.
Right,
Yeah.
and again,
I mean, we did add it.
and there are places where it can be added.
Yes.
So, then I said, we said this, it wasn't that we were ready to sign off on the document as it was, but that we weren't gonna be able to take the conversation any farther without presenting it to village council. We needed to continue the conversation with you all and get to these points, because we could keep going.
You just have to figure out expectations. To your point, Bridget, I mean, it's within a block. I mean, before you go and take away more green space and add more expense, if it's within a block, it just changes expectations. No, there aren't spots right in front of the bookstore every day, but within a block, or half a block, there absolutely are. So I just think we have to be very clear on what we.
And I'm trying to be, any community I go to in the suburbs where I expect to get a parking spot directly in front of a store. I
So-
don't, so.
With respect to the bookstall, all we have to do is make that alley really cool with some murals and some pavement and make it an interesting place to be, and people will park right here and walk to the bookstall. People don't think of that as a cut-through, but if we make it something that's more part of the downtown, it'll
Yeah.
become a natural walkway through, and then all of a
Right,
sudden.
there's more
you just-
signs. More signs.
More signs.
You know what all
Al-
the
alley.
young
Speaking of
people
sign-
want now, though, is spots to take Instagram pictures?
Yeah.
Oh,
You made that
that's
at Winnetka, like in
true.
Austin, there's beautiful
Yeah.
murals.
Yeah.
That are like, I'm in Austin, and people are like selfieing, I mean, this is what they all do, not me. But if we took a mural and made that an interesting alley, I promise you, that would be like
Oh, it'd be
drawing
totally-
people to take pictures and stuff like that.
I've talked to Hoffman about it, they're
That's
open to it. but-
And we always hear about parking from very specific businesses.
Right,
Friday night is my taco night. I order from La Taqueriza on Chestnut, right? And I pick it up on my way home. I walk a block and a half to get my taco. I mean, I do. I mean,
Well, that's
You're getting-
food.
'cause it's
That's
all
worth- That's
full.
worth
Okay,
it.
well,
before you
I mean,
destroy your body
it's
with that
all those
taco,
other
you're doing
businesses.
some exercise.
But every one of those restaurants and businesses always will have parking issues, that people park further away, maybe because they're staying longer in the restaurant, I'm not sure, but
Yeah,
Do you have a sushi night too one night?
no.
okay, okay, let's bring this back in
All
a
Okay,
second.
you mentioned
Kim,
signs.
go ahead.
You mentioned signs. This is more just a general comment. I saw that one of the recommendations was that we put more stop signs or I think speed
Oh.
bumps and things. Okay, no, this is a real question here. Do more stop signs really make things safer I'm asking urban development planners. Only because I'm worried there's just more things for stop signs for people to run or roll through.
Yeah, so a frustrated driver is an unsafe driver. And if they perceive an intersection that is inappropriately signed, they won't abide by it. And you can see that in various places through town. So you have to be very careful. We do have some criteria that we use
Okay.
to decide whether stop signs should go in or not. So, and we try to,
So I
be- and we
didn't
try
know
to
where
be,
that recommendation was going, because
Yeah.
I thought we would have had a
I'm not
process
sure
already.
either,
Well,
but yeah, we do
I
have a
don't
process for it.
Okay.
So-
Stop sign.
There's not a specific recommendation regarding more stop signs. We do talk about considering other traffic calming methods.
Right.
And it piggybacks on, we have a program or a policy by which someone can request a stop sign, but it has to go through what Rob was talking about in terms of this process to request this.
Well, in related to traffic, I loved all the suggestions to try to go back to encouraging kids and parents to walk to school and reducing some of that traffic. I mean, that's one of the charming things about living here, right? And what's called like the walking buses, I thought that was clever of what some other town did. And, you know, our community has a lot of parents who are willing to get on board with great ideas and great programs, so I thought that was really nice.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Walking buses.
Buses
huh?
where you
That's
get the
cool.
group to walk, you know, when we were kids, you just said to your neighbor, you want to walk to school with me today? But today we'll give it some structure and a nice name, and it will become popular. It's a thing to do. No, that was enough for me.
Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, I thought it was really good. When you're in final form, can we get like a PDF with hyperlinks? It is almost impossible to navigate without that. So I actually put it into a PDF, and that's the only way I can navigate it. But you really would benefit from having links and kind of just to make it something manageable. Because I think you find almost any question you have, there's something in there addressing it, which is incredibly helpful, and I think it will be helpful for future trustees. You've got sort of a work list. One of the sort of, it might just be like a taxonomy issue. There's a lot of goals listed, but the way the goal is listed would be deeply troubling if you weren't from Winnetka. Like, for example, we have a goal that we're going to have safe potable water. We do, you know. All right. You know what I'm saying? Like, you go through, there's a lot of goals like that where you're like,
You mean you don't have safe potable
yeah,
water?
like, so it's like a phrasing kind of a thing, and I'm not sure what the solution to that is, except you could drop in, continue to have, but there may be like and I think there was a suggestion before along these lines that I like that you prioritize like high, medium, or low. It may be helpful to have some indication of, and when I first looked at the document, I did my initial pass through, you know what I was looking for is what in this document is calling out something that is different than what would otherwise happen, right? Is there something about the village that we don't like, or we're concerned that we won't like in the future? And, you know, we've heard some of those things, you know, about, you know, like some of the zoning issues, which, you know, me, I tend to fall more on the libertarian side, so I worry less about a crazy-looking house than having ordinances that make it way more expensive for 50 other people to build their houses, because in the long run, we have this issue about how affordable is the town, you know, so, but fair enough, that's a legitimate concern, and people are really worried, like, are we going in the right direction on that issue? I saw a couple of comments about a lack of diversity in the town. And I thought that was good to call out. I don't know what sort of the action items are that are, you know, relate to that, and I think it would be good to call that out. And part of what might be missing on that front might be, and look, so this is Winnetka's plan, but part of Winnetka's plan is how does Winnetka fit into a region? And that region is not just the Winnetka Park District, the Winnetka Library District. It's, you know, it's the city of Chicago up to Waukegan. So I thought there were some good things about mass transit, but what I didn't see really is sort of something that talks about that context, like, you know, are there goals or things that we could be or should be doing that would help us fit in better in a regional context, to be better regional participants? We did that with stormwater. That was an example of working with regional partners. I feel like the music festival is an event where we bring in people from the, you know, all the surrounding community. But so I thought it might be helpful to call some of those things out, because if people are concerned about, hey, I just moved to Winnetka from Chicago, this does not look like the neighborhood I just came from. You know, some of those concerns, some of that anxiety might be, well, you know, how are we connecting with the city? How are we, you know, that's where future homeowners are likely going to be coming from, right? I love the data you guys have with the, like 40% of residents actually work in Chicago. And I thought, you know, there's some data points there that I thought you could possibly build on. So I guess I don't think there's anything you missed at all, frankly. I think you got everything. It's just a matter of like calling out things. And I guess what I was left wondering is if I was, you know, new to the village council or new to policy making in Winnetka, where are we getting it wrong, right? Where do we need, you know, if a planning document is either about changing what we're doing, right, or preventing change that we don't want. And how do we call those things out a little bit more clearly? Because otherwise what we have is a very comprehensive sort of checklist of all of the issues and concerns and almost like a work list, which is good and frankly we haven't had. And I think this is going to be super helpful for future policy, but I think distilling the change side of it, like what is different here, I'm not sure what those change points are, and it's probably a hard thing to do because you're probably feeling like, well, it's not our position to say here's what we should change. But if you're hearing comments from people that are saying, you know, this is something that is different than what, it's not in progress, it's not something that appears to be prioritized, but it's something we heard. And again, I saw a couple comments like that. There was a diversity thing. I thought, you know, there's a lot of references to the bike trail or bikes. I would flag that as an issue where we're woefully off the mark. You know, we say we like biking and walking. It's not true. You know, we tried to get a bike master plan through this town, and people like kind of lost their mind. This was like 10 years or whatever, and we have very unsafe bike routes for kids going to school. Like that's something I would call out. Like it's terrible, and I think it's time we
And
actually.
for adults coming up and cutting over to like the bike trails and the lagoons and
Yeah,
that sort of thing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's just, you know, I think we're woefully deficient on that. You know, the traffic calming, I almost thought you should have a section, just call it resident calming. Because we have terrible aggressive drivers. I mean, you know, people are very nice about it, but our drivers are awful. And like, so let's just acknowledge that. I mean, people are, you know, they will just double park in the middle of a busy road because that's easier for them. They will ride up on people's bumper. I mean, it is crazy out there. And so, you know, I thought you guys did a very politically sensitive job, which is why I wouldn't be allowed to write stuff like this. Doing that, 'cause I'd be like, people are a-holes, settle down, you're gonna get there eventually. So, you know, I guess I would just call out those things. The volunteerism thing and the civic engagement, I thought those are good things to call out. It might be helpful for us to identify opportunities for volunteering in there, like serving the village council or on the plan commission, the Winnetka caucus. You had that great list of like all the other entities, the partner entities, and it might be back to that regional issue I was talking about. It might be we want to expand that to some of the other regional entities, whether it's, you know, all of the various county entities. But I also think something that's been lacking is any kind of coordination. For example, the bike issue again. If Winnetka gets its stuff together and has a perfect bike route, you know, like right now on the Green Bay Trail, you know, what happens when you hit Kenilworth? You're like going through this, you know, so maybe I would call out, like, for example, in the bike master planning, what are the regional entities we need to coordinate with so you can actually ride a bike to Chicago, those sorts of things. But those are not criticism because this was an amazing amount of work. And like I said, whenever I was like, well, did they cover this? And then I actually just typed in a search. I'm like, oh yeah, they did. It's in there. And it was actually covered with a lot of thought and detail, which,
Good.
so I thought that was good.
And yeah, I think the angry drivers, the research has shown that they get angrier right around property tax bills when they come out.
Yeah.
People really start getting pissed off. I had a quick question.
There's certain makes of cars too.
Yeah, I know. I'll match. I know what you're saying.
Certain specific license plates.
I've got a list, we'll talk.
So I guess I'd ask, you guys have spent a lot more time with this than we have, which is, are there any surprises to you? Or was it reaffirming to you? Was it, I'm just kind of, you guys have dug into it a lot more than we have.
You know, I would say there's not a ton of surprises. People love it here.
Yeah.
You know?
That's the
And
challenge.
They love it here, and it's like, okay, it's great. How do we keep it great and make it better where we can? And, you know, the thing that came up over and over, which was a surprise to no one, was the older residents wanting to stay but downsize. You know, that wasn't a surprise, but it was reaffirmed. You know, you've been hearing it for years. But I don't know, was anyone surprised by anything?
That's
Yeah.
kinda-
Were
that's
there
kinda-
any
that's
of
kinda
the
nice.
issues on the older residents wanting to stay where they felt like, if only you guys did this, it would make it easier for me? Because some of it's just hard, because we're lamb.
There was, you know, an interesting thing that came up related to parking from the Winnetka Muse was if we did biking on Green Bay,
Yeah.
it would remove some of the parking, and I never realized that the 4-hour parking signs on Pine were probably designed, they said the caregivers that need to park all day can't park there, so they have to park 2 blocks away, but, like if they're on the residential street, it would be 2 blocks away or on Green Bay, so they were like, just keep in mind that the caregivers need to, you know, so I think they were more worried about if you're older and you're staying, you
Yeah.
have to be thoughtful about the people coming to take care of these people and what they can do, so,
That's a great point.
you know,
Yeah.
don't get rid of parking on Green Bay in favor of bikes unless there's thought given to that, which I had never thought of that, so that was kind of surprising.
Right. I thought that was a really good point.
Well, that was just the last, that was the last.
Just last meeting. And he also made the really excellent point that the Green Bay Trail is right there. So rather than carve out a bike lane on Green Bay Road that would affect parking for residents and businesses, direct the bikers to Green Bay Trail. Mhm. It was a good idea. And again, that was new, and I appreciated that too. It wasn't super surprising, but not an issue that had been raised before.
Yeah, and I think we all sort of appreciated the comment and thought about it
Yeah.
a little bit in the context of the plan. I think that what surprised me was I thought I knew a lot of this instinctively to be true, and then seeing the data that Scott and Lakota brought in to kind of back up the assumptions, and that's peppered through here. There are verbatims, there's data that kind of back up, that then lead into the initiatives and the goals, and we're trying to sort of leave a trail of breadcrumbs, if you will, that's backed by data, rather than be prescriptive or proscriptive in some cases, and believe me, I really wanted to tell you what to do, but it's not really our job to tell you what to do. And so I think the design of it came together in a way that I thought it would, but I was pleasantly surprised that the data kind of backed it up in a number of ways, biking being one of them. I'm having a little sense of deja vu listening to the conversation, because we talked about almost exactly all of this before. We're kind of chuckling to ourselves here, I think, a little bit. We spent probably half an hour to an hour of one meeting talking about specific streets where it's hard for the kids to navigate to get to school. Hill Road being one of them. I mean, we drilled down and had that very conversation. I'm hearing it, the same thing from you, that, you know, again, we're not brilliant or anything, but we kind of anticipated those exact same conversations. Parking was a challenge. We've heard a lot about parking as well, too. We'll comment on that. But we also tried to draw, again, the happy line between telling you what to do and kind of saying, you know, and not just issue spotting or being aspirational, but trying to kind of guide you to where we think the conversation ought to go on each of these issues. And there are a lot of issues, right? These are a lot of different pillars. I don't pretend to be an expert on all of them, or frankly, any of them. We can talk about, you know, some Environmental Forestry Commission type issues very well, Liz and I, but, you know, can't talk about some of the other things. And we didn't want to substitute I didn't want to substitute my judgment, I should say, for the council, or in particular for staff as well, too, who has the expertise when you talk about traffic calming and things like that. I mean, I'm no expert, right? And we really didn't, I think I presume to speak for the group, we really didn't want to do that. But just leave the conversation open, a little bit open-ended, so that you could take it, kind of consider what you see in here, some of the data that underlies it, what we thought would be good initiatives, and then let you run with it to the extent you want to.
Along that line, we're surrounded here with the let's discuss priorities. Do we just leave the priorities as they are, or do we work as proposed, or do we work through?
Well, you know, the thing is that we have a list. It's a bulk list. You know, you'd have to order them 1 through 186, right? I mean, if you went, and the last comp plan actually did something like that.
Oh, okay.
And we don't want to go there. I think what we have here is a pretty comprehensive list of things that council
I mean, what we think is high, medium, low? I mean, do we just leave them and we work with that?
That's where we.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Look
Maybe
at- she's
we-
like, yeah.
Okay, so we just leave this as it is, and then as it progresses, we,
Well, I mean, you know, and we have strategic conversations
Yeah.
every year about what things, and part of it will be, okay, here's what we already have on our plate. Here's the things that are immediately in front of us. Now let's pull out the book and see what other things you want to work on this year. And that's kind of the way it works. It's the only way it can work,
Yeah.
because, you know, staff brings us a ton of work just based on what's necessary to
that's
keep
what
the
I worry
business.
about, the high priorities.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we have a lot of work just keeping the business, keeping the village going. So it only leaves us with limited amounts of time. And then when you have something like the lakefront or
Guns,
historical
guns.
thing, or,
Guns.
you know, all of a sudden, everything takes a left turn for
I know,
3 or
that's
4
right.
months, and then you gotta figure out where you're at and come back, right? So I don't think having anything more than what we have here is necessary.
You know, Chris, I think the nice thing about this document, and everything's been said, but I think what we talked about a year and a half ago, Bridget, you mentioned it, it's a living, breathing document. I think the template was really well put together so that, you know, none of us are gonna wordsmith it. I agree with some of the comments that were made here and so on. And there's a little bit of something for everybody in here. I mean, you know, there are hot points we all have, and you hit on some of my hot points for sure. But then again, it makes you think, and it makes you realize there's sort of the yin and yang between on these issues. Senior living versus tearing down small homes. Should we tear down those small homes? You know, those are affordable homes. I think about the infrastructure. I think about the Green Bay Road corridor. We want that to be safer, walkable, bikeable. But then we also have identified areas that you could do infill development along Green Bay. Is that, you know, is there an inconsistent? So all of these issues, I think it just came through. I mean, you weren't doctrinaire in this. I don't think so at all. I think it's, as Kim said, it was a readable, I enjoyed reading it. We probably all have notes all over the thing. I just think it was great. I think it's really good, just as is for what it is. And yes, I think we could add a few things, David, that have been mentioned and that type of thing, but it's really, I think, exactly what you all were hoping to get out of this. And
Have we ever, it says that we can revise and update over time, have we ever really edited a comp plan?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Oh, we have,
Oh,
okay.
yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Okay, so it
it used to be an
truly is-
annual thing, this
Oh, that's pretty
appendix
extreme.
6 or whatever it is.
Let's not do that, is it?
No.
You start next week.
Right, exactly, get started.
But it used to be an annual,
Okay, well, that's sort of
Yeah.
silly.
and we'd get 1 or 2 things reordered, but that was about all we could ever do.
It's kind of hard to do annual when it takes 3 years to do.
Yeah, I know.
Well, it took us a couple years just to figure out the form that was supposed to lead us to all the things that we were supposed to be reordering. So it was a really heady, you know, matrix, and it was way beyond the comprehension of most of the people that were there on a volunteer basis who don't do this 8 hours a day. So I think this is much more readable. I like the fact that implementation section, you get the whole list. Yeah.
And
You know,
real
I
quick
mean-
on the implementation, and Scott alluded to this, it's also things, even though we talked about this too on the Plan Commission over the last couple meetings, how many of the priorities are loaded into the high and medium. And we did want to, we discussed, before we concluded that we didn't really want to get into it, it was sort of above our pay grade. We also thought, well, we don't really want to just lower priorities or raise priorities sort of arbitrarily. It is arbitrary to kind of come up with a different number, but the other thing to keep in mind with specifically the shorter term priorities, the 1 to 3 year, is it's not that they have to be complete in that time. Many of them are just being started, and again, many of them have been started already, or we need to think about starting them like senior housing if we're going to make a difference in the next 10 to 15 years. We can't wait for 10 years to start thinking about it. So a lot of them
because we'll be
are.
seniors.
Right, well, yes, and then some.
Problem solved.
So, but it is, so it's not, we recognize ambitious, it is, but yes, we have a lot to do.
Yeah, and to go back to the priorities on the implementation, you know, when we started to get to that point, and it would be like, well, why would that why are we concerned with a chain link fence, you know? Why is that a high priority? And coming in and hearing from staff, well, that's because it goes to this. And then the next time you ask, why is it that level of, because we're doing this, and it's like, okay, well, we don't know that, right? So a lot of those things along those lines, we just said, we can't. To you, to staff.
And we'd also wanna like raise everything, and then you'd have 150 high priorities.
Yes.
And 30 medium. and,
84.
like 5 low.
84 is plenty. You know, the other thing is, and Liz, you talked about it, I thought, and what was very helpful, and I look at this before all our meetings, are the meeting minutes that David included in some of those. So all of your meetings, all of this discussion, like you said, you know, has been had. And those minutes are really expansive. And it sort of, if anyone reads those, they're going to understand exactly what follows here. And, you know, what more needs to be said? You've thought about this. They're open-ended. There's gray area all over the place. There always will be. But the template's here. Here we go.
Good deal.
Yeah.
And it's past 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Sorry, guys, I mean, this is something we can give more time to, for sure.
It was a great discussion.
But I think it is a good discussion, so, all right, if any last thoughts? Mark, I saw you waving your finger there. You want to add anything in before we close it up?
Something that Andy said that just made me wonder whether there are either impediments or opportunities to coordinate with others to, in the goal of accomplishing some of our objectives. And what I mean by that is whether it's coordinating with another, with Northfield, you know, and Northbrook on a bike path that goes through, or whether it means coordinating with Chicago Northwestern on improvements in train properties, or whether it means, some of these are opportunities and some of them are impediments, you know, whether it's working with AT&T so they can let us get rid of some telephone poles, or whatever it is that, are there any things that either form either opportunities or impediments that benefit or require us to engage with others? We can't do it by ourselves, or it'll be costly, or somebody else can pay for a portion, just like what we've done with the stormwater. And that's probably throughout somewhere.
It's in,
that-
yeah, it's in,
and
yeah.
I just wanna make sure it's well
We
thought
did
out.
discuss that in various places, like particularly with AT&T and trains, and even, like Illinois about Green Bay Road, like the state of
Right,
Illinois to
IDOT.
decide whether or not, like, we wanna take that over from them. That is important, and you do have to utilize those bigger resources, and I think we have a significant amount in there.
There's a whole
Probably
section on regional coordination, which speaks to all that kind of, yeah, right. Yeah. It's called Pillar 10. I'll tell you, there's one thing that's really unique to this document. We work on comprehensive plans, we're working on like 4 different communities, not even in Chicago, across the country. And one of the biggest chapters that are going in, all of them now, but this town doesn't need it, is a chapter on resiliency. This town has the ability to meet that criteria of resiliency, and it did it spectacularly through the pandemic. We came out better after that than we were starting. When I looked at the stats and the demographic and talked to the realtors before the thing, things were not so great. The stores weren't so full, the restaurants weren't all there, Hubbard Woods wasn't bustling, there were not all the cars parked on the street, and we came through that with flying colors because this town has a built-in recipe for resiliency, which is the people. It's not anything but the people. We have a spirit here that's built into everything that's part of this conversation. I was amazed because every time we're working on anything, we write a section on resiliency, how we're going to come back from this. We don't have to write that.
And a big piece of that, though,
Yeah.
is staff, Rob.
That's right.
On the
That's right.
financials.
Great
on the-
people.
On the financials.
I'm telling you.
Cutting back a few key construction projects that we didn't have to spend the money, waited a year or two, so it's really staff.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah,
They've
it's
done an amazing job during the pandemic, you know, figuring, little things like figuring out ways that you can use Moffett Mall for dining opportunities, and, like John said, cutting back projects. pursuing aggressively the ARPA funds that were available and other pots of money. I mean, yeah, we did come out better, but it wasn't because really anything we did. I mean, it was really Rob and his staff, and they did an amazing job. And thank goodness. Thank you.
Well, and all the residents that rediscovered shopping and eating and whatever.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, and now they have a nice place to do it, too.
So is there a section in the plan if there's any issues with like pandemics, just call Rob?
Call Rob, yeah, check.
Please don't.
Mr. Pandemic.
Thank you all for the work. Awesome.
Okay, gang, well, let's shut this down then. I don't feel like going home yet, so maybe
Oh, boy.
Kathy's mad at me tonight, so I'm trying to find anything I can do not to go home.
Take that off the record, please. Take that out.
I was gonna bring the dog, so I wouldn't have to go home to get her for the walk, but no,
Oh, boy.
and I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding, because my wife watches all these, and now I'm gonna be in a real world of hurt.
Well, all I wanna know is what Leila and Mamie have in your notebooks that we don't have.
All the earlier,
We don't need those.
I'll tell you, in a print, I have the original, like a full print on, it's really vibrant because it's full bleed, and it's pretty spectacular. It's almost like you're reading a story of Winnetka, and that was what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like reading a storybook. So I think this will have some value to it, as it
Looking
makes
forward
that.
to it. So,
I know.
David, you got everything you need now, right?
Yes.
Comments and stuff?
So just, our next step, our thought is that at your first meeting in April, we would bring the plan with changes that we talked about tonight, with an ordinance to consider introduction. So you'd have that meeting to further talk or make any changes. And then the second meeting in April, we would bring then back, if that all goes smoothly, then the ordinance for adoption. So those are our current plans and thoughts about moving forward.
Okay, maybe the way to do this is if you could, in advance, sorry, Rob, it would be nice for us to get the pages that have been modified and redline them.
Yep.
And if we can get them a little earlier than the Friday before the meeting might be helpful.
Sure.
What's so funny, Liz?
That's what we had to do. Liz, oh my God, it was we redlined them all the time and sent the pages back.
But I mean, just the, don't
Yeah.
send us the
yeah.
whole doc, just send us,
Or can I just get a PDF?
or send a,
Yes, we gotta get the PDF.
Just send us
Yeah.
200 change pages.
you know what I'm saying though, David? I
Yeah.
mean, and then, obviously, we'll need a whole nother copy of it at some point. But I think for this next go-around, if we can all keep our current binders, and then we'll just add to that.
Okay?
All right, we're good then. All right? Anything else? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Voice vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned.
Or you could just get a smaller binder.